Take two. First one didn't record. Welcome back to the Dean's List. I'm your host, Dean Lyulkin, and this show is all about helping you cut through the noise and focus on what really matters to your investments and wealth. Before we get started, my 13-year-old daughter, Hannah, wants everyone to know that I have many black shirts just like this, and it's not the same stinky one that I'm wearing for every episode. Thank you, Hannah. Whether you're a seasoned investor or just getting started, we're here to make smarter decisions together. This week's market movements were driven largely by geopolitical events. You know which ones I'm talking about. But Friday's jobs report brought things back in focus. Once again, we're looking at better than expected data, and that confirms we're in a soft landing scenario, according to me. Inflation's cooling, but the economy is still growing. And that said, while some of us might be expecting big rate cuts here right after the election, this report should temper those expectations. Still, with the performance of small cap stocks today, I can't shake the feeling that the market sees this as a Goldilocks scenario, where the Fed can balance growth without overheating our economy. Let's wait and see if this report gives the Fed a reason to have its cake and eat it too. Before we dive into the headlines, I want to make something very clear. You might notice I don't comment on geopolitical topics, and they seem to take up about 2/3 of the news cycle right now. That's intentional. It's not because I don't have thoughts or opinions on the debate or the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. I just think it's better for us to focus on less polarizing things that bring us together as investors, not set us apart. If you're curious about my background, what makes me tick, you can check out episodes of Behind the Business with William Stern and me. You'll get a good feel for what shaped who I am today. And I'll give you a big hint. I'm a Jewish refugee from the communist Soviet Union. Came here to the US at age 11, and I love this country dearly. With that said, let's get into this week's top stories. Was I never going to get my Amazon deliveries? The dockworkers strike. It's over. Now we can all breathe a little easier. Your Amazon orders are going to come on time, but the resolution of this strike doesn't change the bigger picture of the labor challenges we're seeing across industries. This week's Wall Street Journal highlighted Harold Daggett, the 78-year-old leading the dockworkers strike. He's fighting automation, worried it would disrupt industries like shipping. Honestly, battle seemed like a strange one, especially for someone nearing 80. I don't want to see my dad dropping F-bombs on television. I don't know about you. But the real tragedy isn't the strike itself, but this guy's inability to pass the torch to the next generation. And we see this across the board, from Congress to the White House. It's awful. Daggett didn't seem too concerned about the millions of non-unionized truck drivers who were struggling to put food on the table while his little strike was crippling supply chains. Unions were created in this country to protect vulnerable workers, but that's not what's happening here. Dock workers make $39 an hour as a starting wage. That means they make six figures with overtime, and that's from the get-go. Meanwhile, Daggett pulls in over $700,000 a year, and his son pulls in the same amount. People talk about nepotism in corporate America, but look, it's thriving in labor unions. The big takeaway? Automation's inevitable. Instead of fighting it, leaders like Daggett should focus on transitioning workforces and creating new opportunities for them in the future. Otherwise, strikes like this aren't about protecting workers. They're just about protecting a power structure. Does money buy happiness? Oh, hell yeah, it does. According to the Wall Street Journal article, money buys happiness even if you're already rich. The answer is increasingly yes, even for the wealthy. For years, research suggested money only improved happiness up to about $75,000 a year. I always thought that was stupid. I can't believe I have to throw shade at Dan Kahneman, the genius behind some of those early studies. This kind of thing shows how out of touch academics can be. First off, income and wealth are not the same thing at all. A proportional increase in income at any level brings the same emotional boost for all of us. But we instantly start imagining how we'll spend that extra cash. When we finally do, it's usually a letdown. So what happens to the smarter ones among us? We stop spending on material things because it takes more and more to keep feeling that rush. Instead, we start saving and investing, and boom, we live happily ever after. Eventually, our wealth grows to a point where we can start replacing our income with it, hopefully far before we reach the age of 65. And that's where money, freedom, happiness, and satisfaction, they start to converge and overlap. For those who never figure this out, and there are plenty of them, life becomes a giant vortex of feeling like a victim, blaming others, and sometimes ending in bankruptcy. What about the top 0.1% or 0.01% who seem to make the headlines without inheriting or marrying their wealth? I got a theory. These folks fall into two categories: lucky and sad. The lucky ones act like people who go bankrupt, except they're lucky. Their stock options hit big, they held on to Bitcoin too long, they landed the right real estate deals with their family. But the ones I'm most fascinated by, they're the sad ones. These are the obsessive, compulsive, narcissistic types. They read Atlas Shrugged like it's an operations manual for life. They're the people it takes to win at the highest level of anything, though. Giant businesses are built by broken people with holes inside them so big, no amount of admiration, love, or success will ever fill them. In business, success means ever-increasing quarterly earnings and revenues, or you're out. Investors and shareholders admire these people, calling them animals, and they mean it as a compliment. It's the same story in sports, politics, and law, just different games played by different players. So what's the takeaway? Income is fleeting. It doesn't last. Illnesses, layoffs, bad career choices. But wealth that replaces your income, that's the real game. And if you want to be happy, focus on building wealth, not just income. The average car costs $44,000? What the heck? Lastly, let's talk about the auto market. The Journal reported high prices and rising borrowing costs are keeping auto sales stagnant this year. Really, there's nothing new here. Automotive stocks have been treading water since pre-COVID. Even Tesla, your darling of the EV world, hasn't done anything for shareholders in 3 years. Is it a canary in the coal mine? I don't know, maybe. Average selling price of a new car is now $44,000. Consumers are dealing with this reality by stretching payments out longer than ever, which correlates to rising subprime auto loan defaults that we see. But hey, companies like O'Reilly and Snap-on are doing just fine. Why? Because people are holding onto their cars longer and doing more out of warranty maintenance. What's interesting to me, though, is the high-end desirable vehicles, Porsches and Ferraris, stuff I like, are retreating despite the stock market's strength the past 2 years. You probably don't care, I get it, unless you have one or want one. But why is demand softening? And it's not just cars. Art prices are falling too, as we've seen in some headlines this week from the Journal. I know, the world's smallest violins playing for the art owners. So what's the real takeaway here? High-end consumers are being cautious with discretionary spending on physical goods. I'd put this in the possibly not too important pile for now, but let's pay attention to any further developments. That wraps up this week's Dean's List. We've covered a lot, from my black t-shirts to the port strike to auto sales to whether money buys happiness. Remember, the key is to build wealth that replaces your income sooner than later. Don't get caught up in the short-term noise. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. And if you're an accredited investor interested in Cardiff's stable, high-yield 2-year corporate notes, check out the link in the description to learn more about Cardiff's offering. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.